What's the difference between cheap dopamine and expensive dopamine? Welcome back to the channel, folks. Dr. Sharma here, physician, board-certified psychiatrist, and Air Force veteran. As always, I wanted to mention that this video is for informational purposes only. It is not medical or psychiatric advice. It's time to talk about dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter that's also known as the pleasure chemical or feel-good chemical in the brain. The reason why this is important is because we interact with things that cause our brains to release dopamine on a regular basis. And it's important to understand how and why this happens, because there are things in our environment competing for our brain's attention, and some of those things may not be very good for us. Not all dopamine is created equal. One thing I wanted to mention here is, obviously in this video, I'm oversimplifying things a bit. When we experience pleasure or joy, lots of neurotransmitters and hormones are released in our bodies, but I'm focusing on dopamine because of how powerful it is. First, let's talk about an experiment from the 1950s that can really show us the power of dopamine. Researchers examined rats who they hooked up to a stimulation device. The stimulator was targeting the nerve bundle that links dopamine neurons with their targets, and the rats would be able to press a button to trigger that stimulation. They found that the rats would literally press that button over and over again, thousands of times per day, to the point of them skipping meals, not paying attention to the other rats, and just generally not caring about anything else. So these rats would literally keep pressing the button even if they were starving. Now, the same experiment was done on a human patient in 1970. By the way, that is highly unethical and should never be done. But the human pressed the button over 1,500 times in 3 hours. So this is the power of dopamine. And based on these experiments, it's not surprising that addictive drugs target this same dopamine system. That's why people who are suffering from addiction will sacrifice everything else in their lives to once again have a chance at getting that dopamine hit. This brings us to cheap dopamine versus expensive dopamine. Cheap dopamine refers to the quick, easy hits of pleasure we get from things like scrolling through social media. Now, I'm not saying any use of social media does this, but the social media that is quick. So things like TikTok videos, Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, they are extremely short and provide us with quick hits of dopamine over and over again. And just like that button in the experiment, we swipe our thumbs up over and over again. There's another concept at play here, and it's related to gambling, actually. So you've probably noticed that when you scroll on social media like this, you might scroll past 5 clips and find one that you really like. But it's variable. You never know when you're going to find that clip that makes you laugh or is enjoyable. That is another concept that these companies use to their advantage, and it's also used in casinos. Every time we pull the lever in the casino, we never know when we're going to hit that jackpot. Now, this concept comes from experiments done in the past where one group of subjects were given rewards consistently when they pulled a lever, but another group were given rewards variably, meaning that they would pull the lever, but they didn't know when they would get the reward. Well, guess what? The second group ended up pulling the lever even more. So in that experiment from the rats with dopamine, if you made the reward variable, they would have probably pressed the button even more, which is what happens in casinos, right? We pull the lever over and over again because we never know when we're gonna win. The problem with cheap dopamine is that although it gives us that instant gratification, it often leaves us feeling empty and honestly craving more. Because with a short video or burst of dopamine, although the rush is there, it also leaves pretty quickly. And this can be applied to almost anything. Even folks who have problems with shopping excessively, they'll often receive like a brand new thing, maybe clothing or a gadget. It has that newness for a little while, but it goes away pretty quickly. The other problem with the quick dopamine hits is that after the temporary high, we come down, and then we want more and more of those cheap dopamine hits. But this isn't always possible to get, and then we start feeling depressed and anxious. Expensive dopamine, on the other hand, that's where the money's at. It comes from activities that require effort and investment, and also give us long-term satisfaction and fulfillment. And there are a lot of these examples. So that includes exercising, learning new skills like maybe playing an instrument or learning a new language, spending time on a creative project like photography or artwork, spending quality time with loved ones. Now these activities, they don't give you that immediate high, but it's more of a lower grade sustained high that leads to more well-being. And you've probably noticed this yourself. Think about these types of meaningful activities you've done in the past. Notice how those memories also stick in your mind. With these really meaningful, powerful experiences, we think about them a lot, we relive them in our mind, and we have joy when we remember them. So going fishing with a loved one, going on vacation with your spouse, going for ice cream with your kid, these things stay with you long term. On the other hand, imagine the short dopamine hits like the short videos, or maybe alcohol or drugs or excessive shopping or whatever it is. Those experiences don't really stay with you long term, and when you think about them, they don't typically bring feelings of joy later. The other benefit of doing activities that provide expensive dopamine is that these things promote resilience, they improve mental health and overall life satisfaction. This has been shown in studies. It's more of a balanced release of dopamine, leading to a more stable and fulfilling life. How can we make the shift from cheap dopamine to expensive dopamine? First, identify your triggers. Recognize the activities that lead to cheap dopamine hits and limit your exposure to them. Look at the things in your life that only give you those quick hits of pleasure, but not the sustained joy that you're looking for. Next, set goals. Focus on long-term goals that require effort and provide a sense of accomplishment. Activities that expand your mind, get you to be creative, and engage with other humans in the real world. Then practice mindfulness. Engage in these mindfulness practices to stay present and appreciate the moment. When you're with your family, be with your family. Put the phone aside, enjoy that time with them, be there in the moment, and forget everything else. Finally, build healthy habits. Activities like exercise, reading, socializing. Bring them into your daily routine as much as you can, or at least a few times a week or on weekends. Understanding the difference between cheap dopamine and expensive dopamine can transform your life. By prioritizing activities that provide us that long-term satisfaction, we can improve our mental health and overall well-being. That's it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for you to take a deeper look at dopamine, the pleasure centers, and how to improve our lives by finding more meaningful activities. If you found this helpful, please like, comment, subscribe to my channel. It really helps and it tells me that I'm doing something right. Also, please drop a comment below about your thoughts on this topic and if you have requests on what I should cover in the future. I'd be happy to make a video on it. As always, thanks for watching. Dr. Sharma signing off. See you next time.